Вот, товарищ танцор, цвет нации, элита Красной Армии.
The Ukrainian Air Force continues its relentless campaign against Russian forces, demonstrating growing precision and intensity in its operations. In one of the latest strikes, a Ukrainian MiG-29 launched 3 GBU-39 small-diameter bombs, hitting Russian positions north of Polohy in the Zaporizhzhia region. These Western-supplied munitions allow Ukraine to strike deep behind the front lines with high accuracy, minimizing risk to pilots and collateral damage. Over recent weeks, Ukrainian jets and helicopters have been highly active across multiple axes, from Kharkiv to the south, targeting command posts, supply depots, and concentrations of troops. Despite ongoing Russian air defenses, Ukraine's pilots fly low and fast, often releasing bombs from standoff distances to avoid detection. Coordinated with drone reconnaissance and ground intelligence, these airstrikes are weakening Russian logistics, forcing their units to disperse and operate under constant threat. The Air Force's growing role reflects a shift in Ukrainian tactics, toward agile, high-impact precision warfare that maximizes limited air power with devastating effect. Ukraine's military intelligence agency said it eliminated 3 Russian drone operators from the Bars Sarmat unit in a strike on the occupied Kherson region. The main intelligence directorate reported that the operators were killed near the occupied village of Strilkov, Kherson region, when an explosive device detonated inside a Chevrolet Aveo. All 3 Russians, including the group's senior leader, were killed in the explosion. According to the military intelligence, the Bars Sarmat Special Purpose Center was formed in 2024 in the occupied Zaporizhzhia region. It is involved in the testing and operational deployment of unmanned and electronic warfare systems, including UAVs, robotic platforms, electronic reconnaissance, and communications equipment. The unit is reportedly led by Dmitry Rogozin, former head of Russia's space agency Roscosmos. The Bars Sarmat Center includes several detachments. The group targeted in this incident was part of the Bars 1 unit, based in occupied Henichesk. The Defense Intelligence of Ukraine reminds, every war crime against the Ukrainian people will be met with just retribution, the agency said in a statement. On July 3rd, an explosion in central Luhansk killed Manolis Pilavov, a high-ranking pro-Russian official. Authorities attributed that blast to another unidentified explosive device. Russian troops are seen laughing at a new recruit sent to their unit, a man near retirement age who can barely walk. He arrived at the front as part of reinforcements, and no one expects he'll last long in combat.
Вот, товарищ танцор, цвет нации, элита Красной Армии. Будет, 137-й гвардейский полк ВДВ просто вздрогнет от таких бойцов. Давай, давай, ты уж слишком быстро идешь, не торопись, не торопись.
Ukrainian soldiers from the 110th Mechanized Brigade showed one of their anti-drone corridors in Donetsk region, roads covered with netting to protect military vehicles from Russian FPV drones. President Volodymyr Zelensky and U.S. President Donald Trump held a phone conversation on July 4th, agreeing to strengthen Ukraine's air defenses, Zelensky announced on Telegram. The call came as Russia escalated its aerial campaign across Ukraine, including an overnight July 4th attack that struck Kyiv and several other regions, injuring at least 23 civilians and sparking dozens of fires in the capital. Today we discuss the situation, Russian airstrikes, and, more broadly, the situation on the front lines. President Trump is very well informed, Zelensky said. We discussed air defense options and agreed to work on increasing airspace protection. We agreed on a meeting between our teams. Zelensky said the two leaders also discussed Ukraine's defense industry potential and explored possibilities for direct cooperation with U.S. partners. We are ready for direct projects with America and believe that this is extremely necessary for security, especially with regard to drones and related technologies, he added. Trump told Zelensky that the U.S. is willing to assist Ukraine with air defense amid intensified Russian strikes, Axios reported, citing unnamed sources. The call between the two presidents reportedly lasted about 40 minutes. This conversation followed a phone call between Trump and Russian President Vladimir Putin on July 3rd, during which the Kremlin said Putin reaffirmed that Russia will continue to pursue its goals in its war against Ukraine despite U.S. calls for a ceasefire. Trump told reporters on July 3rd that he was very disappointed by the conversation with Putin. "I don't think he's there. I don't think he's looking to stop this fighting." The call also followed the U.S. Defense Department's decision to pause shipments of key weapons systems to Ukraine, including Patriot missiles and precision-guided artillery rounds. Kyiv has warned that the delay threatens to weaken its air defenses and emboldens Moscow. Despite repeated expressions of frustration about Russia's continued aggression, Trump's administration has yet to impose new sanctions or approve additional aid for Ukraine since taking office in January. While Russia and Ukraine resumed direct talks in Istanbul this year, the two rounds of negotiations, on May 16th and June 2nd, have yielded only prisoner exchanges and no progress toward a ceasefire. The Defense Department held up a shipment of U.S. weapons for Ukraine this week over what officials said were concerns about its low stockpiles. But an analysis by senior military officers found that the aid package would not jeopardize the American military's own ammunition supplies, according to 3 U.S. officials. The move to halt the weapons shipment blindsided the State Department, members of Congress, officials in Kyiv, and European allies, according to multiple sources with knowledge of the matter. Critics of the decision included Republicans and Democrats who support aiding Ukraine's fight against Russia. A leading House Democrat, Adam Smith of Washington, said it was disingenuous of the Pentagon to use military readiness to justify halting aid when the real reason appears to be simply to pursue an agenda of cutting off American aid to Ukraine. "We are not at any lower point stockpile-wise than we've been in the 3.5 years of the Ukraine conflict," Smith, the ranking member of the House Armed Services Committee, told NBC News. Smith said that his staff has seen the numbers and, without going into detail, that there was no indication of a shortage that would justify suspending aid to Ukraine. Suspending the shipment of military aid to Ukraine was a unilateral step by Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth, according to 3 congressional aides and a former U.S. official familiar with the matter. It was the 3rd time Hegseth on his own has stopped shipments of aid to Ukraine, the sources said. In the 2 previous cases, in February and in May, his actions were reversed days later. A senior Pentagon official, Elbridge Colby, the Undersecretary of Defense for Policy, has backed the moves, the sources said. Colby has long advocated scaling back the U.S. commitment in Ukraine and shifting weapons and resources to the Pacific region to counter China. Lawmakers from both parties were frustrated that they were not notified in advance and were examining whether the delayed shipment violated legislation mandating security assistance for Ukraine, according to congressional aides. Those lawmakers and some European allies were trying to determine just why the Pentagon ordered the suspension and were scrambling to get it reversed. The White House has defended the decision, saying it followed an ongoing review by the Defense Department of U.S. assistance to allies and partners abroad that began last month. The review began after Hegseth issued a memo ordering the Pentagon's Joint Staff to review stockpiles of all munitions. According to 3 officials familiar with the matter, the assessment found that some stockpiles of high-precision munitions were at lower levels but not yet beyond critical minimums. The Joint Staff concluded that providing continued assistance to Ukraine would not drain U.S. supplies below a required threshold needed to ensure military readiness, the officials said. The Pentagon did not respond to a request for comment Thursday. Pentagon spokesman Sean Parnell called the assessment a capability review at a briefing Wednesday. "We can't give weapons to everybody all around the world," Parnell said. "Part of our job is to give the president a framework that he can use to evaluate how many munitions we have where we're sending them. And that review process is happening right now and is ongoing." Ukraine has issued urgent appeals to Washington for more air defense systems as Russia has stepped up its bombardment of Ukrainian cities. Over the weekend, Russia launched its biggest aerial attack of the 3-year-old conflict, firing 60 missiles and 477 drones across the country. The delayed shipment included dozens of Patriot interceptors, coveted weapons for Ukraine to knock out incoming missiles, as well as 155mm artillery rounds, Hellfire missiles, precision-guided missile systems known as GMLRS, grenade launchers, Stinger surface-to-air missiles, and AIM air-to-air missiles for Ukraine's small fleet of F-16 fighter jets. In Poland and other European countries, some of the U.S. weapons had already been loaded onto trucks, ready to be delivered to Kyiv to help its government fend off Russian missile attacks and hold the line against ground forces in the country's east. Then, military officers and officials handling the shipment got word that the delivery had been called off, said two sources with knowledge of the matter. The weapons shipment was approved during the Biden administration, 3 U.S. officials said. Some of the weapons were pulled from U.S. stockpiles, with the Pentagon receiving funds to replenish them. Other munitions fall under a program that provides money to buy new weapons for Ukraine from American defense companies, the officials said. Those weapons are not drawn from U.S. supplies. Since the United States began sending large shipments of weapons to Kyiv after Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine in February 2022, U.S. officials and commanders have grown concerned about the state of American stockpiles of munitions and other equipment. The aid effort has laid bare the inadequacy of the defense industrial base to replenish those weapon stocks. That has, in some cases, put the Pentagon at dangerously low levels of some munitions, including 155mm artillery rounds, according to multiple U.S. officials and former military officers. In a letter to President Donald Trump, Representative Brian Fitzpatrick, RPA, requested an emergency briefing from the White House and the Defense Department to review the decision to withhold urgent, life-saving military assistance to Ukraine. He argued that it was possible to both maintain adequate weapons supplies for the U.S. military and send arms badly needed by Kyiv. Dan Caldwell, a former senior Pentagon official, defended the pause by Hegseth and Colby. They are prioritizing the safety and readiness of our own military over pleasing the foreign policy establishment, who often seem in denial about the real constraints the United States military is facing, Caldwell said. Hegseth has twice before suspended aid to Ukraine without apparent coordination with lawmakers on Capitol Hill or even within the administration. The first time, in February, drew a prickly response from the chairman of the Senate Armed Services Committee, Roger Wicker, R. Mississippi, who called the move a rookie mistake. The next time was in early May, according to a Senate aide. In both cases, the suspensions of aid were reversed within days. Representative Michael McCall, R. Texas, a staunch supporter of military aid to Ukraine, said it was crucial to show Russia that the United States would stand behind Ukraine. We can't let Putin prevail now. President Trump knows that too, and it's why he's been advocating for peace, McCall wrote on social media. Now is the time to show Putin we mean business. And that starts with ensuring Ukraine has the weapons Congress authorized to pressure Putin to the negotiating table.
Thanks for watching, and don't forget to subscribe. Also, if you want to support Warthog Defense, please become our member and get early access to new videos, exclusive members-only videos, and become administrator in comment section. The membership link is in the description.
Every day. We had a guy last week at 6 rescues in 6 days. You know, he's doing the job every day.